To question authority. It is 17th of September, and I am your host. So, we're going to continue the discussion from yesterday, and we went over a few different things. So, just in summary, most of it was an examination of our society and class divisions, and comparing that to the class divisions in Rome with the plebeians and the patricians. And then getting into an examination of how grassroots movements get neutered or rendered ineffective once once people get into power, once people enter Washington, D.C. A lot of them fire their activist staff and they hire these DC insiders. And there's a list of names. There's so many people that just get recycled from administration to administration, and essentially their purpose and their goal and what they want is really just to have power and prestige. Ultimately, that seems to be their end goal. And one thing that has bothered me for a very, very long time, it seems so condescending and frustrating, and it's been growing and growing. Even some of the people I listen to, they use this word, folks. And this is a pretty good article here. This is from the New Republican, um, talking about who started this, using this language. And it was Barack Obama. Barack Obama tried to appear like a regular, normal American. Same thing with Joe Biden. Just your Uncle Joe, your average Joe. These people are part of a elite class. They they have no point of reference in the regular, average working person's life. They have no idea what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. No idea what it's like to take care of your own affairs. I mean, these people are pampered, rich, spoiled assholes, and it doesn't matter where they grew up. It seems like the system just corrupts them completely. And we went over in the last stream too that more than half of the U.S. presidents that we've had were lawyers, which is very, very disturbing because they all try to present themselves not as rich, pampered lawyers, or, Donald Trump was a rich, pampered son of a real estate magnate who was given millions of dollars to start many, many businesses. Most of them failed. So he kind of tried to show himself as an outsider as well. But we're not seeing anyone in in our leadership in our government that actually really truly represents the people. And unfortunately, now there are a few people that are getting elected that appear to be just your average people. But just like in the Roman times, the plebeians could become a servant of the patricians if they were fortunate. I saw a tweet on Twitter, and it was actually really good, and it just pointed out that you can be from a lower class and still serve the higher class interests. So it seems like common sense that one way of maintaining accountability for an elected representative so that they don't get swayed and just pushed into the same mold of your typical swamp creature in DC. Um, and one of those things is growing and creating a social network so that your grassroots supporters can speak up and have a say and have access to these leaders. So we're seeing a lot of the squad members completely cutting off access to anyone that would challenge them on anything that they've done. So they refuse to do any interviews with people who would give them hard questions. And then we have now this sort of watering down of independent media, progressive media. Someone like Kyle Kalinske, who I used to listen to occasionally. His content just wasn't very engaging for me, um, but I did notice that his point of view was usually very objective, or at least aligned with the way that I view the world. And he seemed to be trying to be honest and remain true to his values. Now, Crystal Ball is another one, and the two of them have a show now. It's Crystal, Kyle, and Friends. And Crystal and Sagar, they were on the Hill Rising, which was very engaging and very interesting. And they did a lot of really good interviews and really good commentary. But the Hill is a corporate owned machine. So what happened was Crystal and Sagar left the Hill, and now the Rising is populated with, milk toast, neutered leftists like Ryan Grimm and that ilk. The people that just speak progressive language, but they're afraid to touch certain topics, and essentially they're just a watered down version of a faux revolutionary. So Crystal and Kyle and Friends. And I've seen this because Twitter is like a public square. Twitter is a place where people are just spouting out their opinions. It can be very negative because it's unfiltered, and the internet really does cultivate the worst of us in a lot of ways. So really negative and nasty arguments and things like that happen on Twitter because it's very impersonal too. You can hide behind a false identity. You don't have to show your real name or your picture or anything like that. And then you can troll people. You can try and frustrate and anger people. You can do all sorts of things online that you probably wouldn't do in real life. But getting back to the topic at hand, so we have these leaders that are part of an elite class. Even if they grew up poor, if they, graduated and went to an Ivy League school, they were indoctrinated into this upper class society, this society of patricians who look down on the poor and they scorn the poor and unwashed masses. I never found those people to be interesting. Of course, the money and allure and celebrity and power, all of those things are attractive to all of us as human beings. But I always found most interesting the people that achieve some sort of status, but still manage to maintain their principles and remain humble and remain committed to the purposes that got them there in the first place. So, Obama, and this is just a grievance that I have as far as it feels condescending to use this word folks and constantly use it over and over and over again. So here we have an article, Why Politicians Can't Stop Talking About Folks. The perpetual quest to win over real, unpretentious Americans. And it says any recent history of folks in political discourse must begin with Barack Obama, who used the word more than twice as often as any other president. And this was a very well thought out and intentional tactic. So revealed highlights the kind of friendly consensus he believed could exist between the 1% and the rest of America. Um, Glenn Greenwald was on Jimmy Dore yesterday, and it was very interesting. He points out, and something I never even thought about, how this the servant class, like the waiters and the people that are taking care of celebrities at their galas. So the Met Gala just happened recently, and you have all of the servants are masked, so they're hiding their faces, obscuring their identity, and it's all very dystopian. It's all very subtly and insidiously trending more and more towards an authoritarian society with two very distinct classes. and a consolidation of wealth and power among very, very few. So, one way to break that, break the chains of this corporate duopoly and this consolidation of power, is to get the masses of people together. Because the masses of people far overwhelm the few that have power. But the challenging task is to get them organized and get them cooperating with one another and get people just to understand that the power ultimately does rest within us. Every politician pays attention to public opinion. On the right, on the left, neoconservative, neoliberal, they do pay attention to what the public wants to some extent. Now, they use their mechanisms of propaganda and control to try and change public opinion because they don't want the public opinion to turn against them. And one of these really cheap tactics is using this word, folks. So Obama famously said in 2014, we tortured some folks. And he went on to warn his own audience not to be too sanctimonious about the tough job that these folks, the CIA interrogators, who were doing in Iraq and after September 11th. So he's using this colloquial language to try and soften the blow. The blow is that we found out that our military officers in the CIA were torturing people. And a lot of these people that were caught up in this whole anti-Muslim web that was created, this very xenophobic fear of the other that was cultivated, and that's another tactic that's always used to keep the masses separated and keep people fighting against each other, is to find a boogeyman and throw them to the vicious mob so that the mob can tear them apart, while the people that remain on top of them laugh all the way to the bank. So this word, folks, I think we should all stop using it. Anyone who is an activist or someone who's trying to promote progressive change, let's completely erase this word from our vocabulary, because it is a condescending tool to rhetorically excuse terrible things that the government does. So let's see. He told an audience in Philadelphia last year, folks, I know some of the really smart folks say Democrats don't want to hear about unity. See how unifying folks can be? So it's frustrating. I hate it. It drives me fucking crazy. And I wish the people that are on our side would completely toss that word into the garbage and take it completely out of their vocabulary. Because the legacy of Barack Obama is not a legacy of hope and change. It's a legacy of broken promises that led to this little weasel, Donald Trump, getting elected. So you can tell a lot about a person by who they surround themselves with and who they listen to. What opinion ultimately wins out at the end of the day? To run and to execute a successful presidential campaign requires a massive amount of advisors and volunteers. The important thing is to never take on any DC insider, period. Even if you think they agree with you, there is a corruption and a rot that has spread through this class of people, this I don't even know what you would call them, this advisor class. There was a famous advisor to, let's see, Rasputin, I think Rasputin. So I think a good term for these people would be the Rasputin class. Let's see. So he made bold claims about his abilities. He said he had the ability to heal the sick and predict the future. Introduced to the royal family, summoned to the palace. I succeeded in healing the boy's suffering. And then consistently maintained a posture of a holy and humble and holy peasant. I fell into outside of the court, fell into licentious habits. This sounds a lot like people like David Axelrod or Rahm Emanuel. The people behind the scenes, sort of pulling the strings. There's one other name, very, very specific name. I think it was in this article. But anyways, that can be another task for us to create a list of names of these people, and they go on to late night talk shows. They go on to CNN. They go on to CSNBC or CNBC. These Rasputin advisors get in there and they ruin everything. So I want to know, I'm trying to find out what exactly did he do though. So let's see if we can fit them into this kind of bucket. All right, so licentious habits outside of the court. Check. Made bold claims about his abilities and check. Rasputin reached the pinnacle of his power at the Russian court after 1915 and left him in charge of Russia's internal affairs. Rasputin's influence occasionally intervened in military measures to Russia's detriment, though supporting a political assault by anyone. Oh, there we go. Rasputin was a strong opponent of anyone opposing the autocracy or himself. Check. Let's see. Okay, getting completely off topic. So let's jump into the article, and we'll talk about the Ministry of Truth a little bit later. So Obama's lost army. Obama built a grassroots machine of 2 million supporters, eager to fight for change. Then he let it die. This is the untold story of Obama's biggest mistake and how it paved the way for Trump. So everyone blaming Jill Stein, everyone blaming anyone who voted for a third party candidate. You need to look no further than the president who came before. This age of the internet, this age of information where we're all plugged into each other, we can mobilize and we can produce mass protests, and we can mobilize around a candidate, and we can change minds. But the biggest problem is coordination, getting everyone on the same page to a certain extent, finding the things that the majority of us can all fight for together. And a lot of those things do come to class differences. So the patricians and the plebeians, if the plebeians can all, we can hold our representatives accountable through a type of mechanism that was proposed by one of Obama's advisors. So I'm not going to read the entire article. But Christopher Edley is a very interesting figure. Now, he was involved in advising Bill Clinton. There was another president, and also involved in Barack Obama. He was one of his teachers in law school. He had very different ideas than people like David Axelrod or David Plouffe. That's the name I was trying to conjure up. So this Rasputin class of advisors get tacked on to our leaders once they reach a certain height of power. Now, instead of resisting their influence, they welcome them in with open arms. So the intervention. So David for Edley, he Obama campaign managers to schedule fewer rallies and fundraisers and allow the candidate more time to think and develop innovative policy ideas. We're big fans of Bernie Sanders because he wants to focus on policy. And politics so often becomes a popularity contest. It becomes a cult of personality. And we're all unhappy because the people with these personalities that we like don't do the things they promise us that they're going to do, and we have no access to them. We have no access. They don't have to listen to us. They can push our opinions aside, and they can ignore us. And then they can spin the situation. They can take their time to create spin around their misdeeds and justify what they've done. It was uncovered yesterday. We all know about AOC going to the Met Gala with a tax the rich dress. There's a few theories coming out. Glenn Greenwald says that she wanted to go. And of course she did. Look at her. She does interviews with Vanity Fair. She takes pictures with Nancy Pelosi. She's very obsessed with fashion. None of these things, even of themselves, are bad. But she calls herself a socialist, and she says that she's a revolutionary to fight the system. But you can't fight the system when you're cozying up to them to be their best friends. One of the biggest tells if a person is really feared by the establishment is if they fight back hard against them. And maybe they did in the beginning, but not anymore. Look at what happened with Bernie Sanders' campaign. And the problem with Bernie Sanders' campaign is that he ran within the DNC. And after 2016, the DNC completely, intentionally destroyed his campaign and even admitted it. They admitted in court that they are a private corporation and they can select whatever candidate they want in a back room smoking cigars or something like that. That was the type of language that they used. So they give us this whole theater of a primary, and they give us the impression that we can fight for change within the party and we can turn it around and make it something else, but that's never ever going to happen. And one of the reasons that it's not going to happen is because we have these gatekeepers in place. We have this Rasputin class, these people that claim that they have the power to get you elected, these quote-unquote kingmakers. So Edley told them, slow down with the campaign, slow down with the rallies, take a break and think about policy. Think about what you want to actually accomplish. So he intervened at a certain point, and the article says the intervention delivered with a full-blown harangue telling the troika managing the campaign, that was David Axelrod, David Plouffe, and Robert Gibbs, all terrible swamp creatures, warmongering, careerists, people who are completely okay with the washing of tax money into weapons and defense contractors while ignoring the humanitarian issues surrounding them. They don't know what it's like to be homeless. They don't know what it's like to actually work a difficult job and live paycheck to paycheck. They don't know what it's like to have to rent an apartment. They don't know what it feels like to be evicted. They don't know what it's like to have just a normal conversation with a normal person out on the street doing normal things like buying groceries. These people are far, far away from us. They are insulated in their little golden castles up on the hill, and the unwashed masses are kept at arm's length. So Edley tried to shake them up, and I've met people like this, and I've had arguments with people like this, mostly within a religious situation, like in the church environment. And people, typically with a lot of money and a lot of status, don't like to be challenged. They don't like anyone to contradict them and tell them that their ideas are wrong. They will push back with massive force simply because of their ego, simply because of their arrogance, regardless of whether or not the rebuke or the contradiction of their ideas is correct or not. Their ego stands in the way of their objectivity because they think that they are always right and they feel like they are gods. So Edley rebuked these powerful Rasputin advisors, and he told them to get over yourselves. And that was deeply resented by the political uh, professionals. In his memoir, Believer, Axelrod would later call Edley systematically antagonizing. Now, what we're trying to do right now, some of us, is to systematically antagonize the few leaders that we have that may potentially still pull their heads out of that muck and that swamp and come back to the grassroots that birthed them and finally be accountable and finally start to stand up for us. Um, I got finished watching Movement for People's Party call. They had a conference call. It's posted up on YouTube and talked about the Occupy Congress action. And Nick Brana, he made an important point. That the protest that they had outside of the Capitol a few months ago about their mortgage crisis, or the rent crisis, and the eviction crisis, that it was essentially called a press conference. But because Cori Bush and AOC are members of Congress, they were given permission to go out there, to have a sound system, to pull a car up in front of the steps, and to hold a protest. Now, we all know that that protest achieved nothing. A temporary stay of evictions that was overturned by the Supreme Court, and I have not heard anything. I might be wrong, but I haven't heard anything from them since the Supreme Court overturned that ruling. We came out and went on the steps. I didn't actually get there until the protesters were arrested, and when I arrived, there was just a line of cops and a few the activists left. But if Cori Bush and AOC really cared about this issue, they would be out there and they would be endorsing this protest. But they're playing political games. So Edley wanted Obama to take a break from all of the rallies and fundraisers. Now, I'm sure rallies and fundraisers are fun. That's great. These interviews on late night TV shows, talking to comedians, having fancy dinners with rich people. That's all really, really fun. But sitting down with serious people, grassroots activists, and intellectuals who care about changing our society for the better, to hash out real policy initiatives that can succeed is not fun. For certain people, I would find it exciting and engaging because I like that kind of thing. Um, Trying to solve the problems of our society, being able to network with people who have a much better intellect than I do, much better ideas than I do, more experience than I do, and to be able to pass back and forth ideas to actually figure out how we can fix these problems that we have the money to fix. We know that now. If Bernie ran today, he could claim every single time they said, "Oh, how are you going to pay for it?" He could point to Afghanistan and say, "How did you pay for that? $300 million a day you spent in Afghanistan, and when you leave, the Taliban takes over like that." So why can't you spend that $300 million a day? You found that fucking money. He wouldn't say fucking. Oh, you found that money. I don't know. I fucking do Bernie. Um, Listen here, you found that money. I don't know. Okay, let's stop trying to do impressions. But anyways, so he intervened with these cocky DC insiders, and he told them to get over themselves, and they deeply resented that. So David Axelrod mentions it in his memoir because a lot of them, they know that they're going to make millions of dollars from just selling their fucking books too. They're going to sell their books, they're going to get speaking fees and engagements, but they haven't earned that status or that position because they haven't fucking done anything. There was an article that came out about the generals in Afghanistan and how they're all on these speaking tours now. And people are paying to listen to generals that lost a war or an engagement that accomplished nothing in this country. They were just willing tools of a gigantic grift for 20 years to steal $300 million a day from us, essentially. So um, he called Edley systematically antagonizing. So that's what we need to do. We need to systematically antagonize our leaders until they finally stop going to their galas and stop going to their fancy dinners and stop going to the rallies where they can feed their egos and drink in the applause of their adoring fans and get back to work. We hired you to be a politician, a public servant. We did not hire you to be a fucking Instagram model or whatever you want to call it, a facilitator of moving money around for the rich, a person up for sale to be bought at the highest price to help further consolidate corporate power in this country. So there's these swamp creatures, these people like David Axelrod, David Plouffe, Robert Gibbs. They get a lot of praise in the media, and they're very highly recognized for their achievements. So it looks like Valerie Jarrett and Michelle Obama really like Edley, but these Rasputin advisors did not. So what did Edley want to do? And this is my point. Edley, I'll just read from the article. So, opening the July brainstorming session, Edley framed the stakes sharply according to the notes he prepared for the meeting and a summary he wrote afterward. On the morning of November 5th, he told the assembled tech leaders, imagine saying to millions of donors, new voters, volunteers, thanks for everything, so long. And that's what they did, and that's what they fucking do. So, and watch, it'll happen. You know, the election season will roll around, the midterms, and then finally the next presidential election. They'll pump tons of money into grassroots organizations, mobilize people, teach them about their policies and their platforms and all these ideas for things that they're going to do for us. And they'll get everyone engaged and they'll get our energy up and they'll get us mobilized and they'll get us excited and they'll get us believing in them, knocking on doors for them, sending our small dollar donations to them. And then after they get elected, they say, so long, folks. Thanks. Now I'm only going to talk to uh, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. And I'm only going to talk to the talking heads on MSNBC, Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo. They can have access to me, but all of the people who actually did something for me took time out of their day, working people with jobs that go and take time out of their day to go and knock on doors, to make phone calls for them, working people with jobs that go out and take the money that they earn and send it to these political campaigns. Bernie Sanders gave a lot of his money, and I think it's just the way that it works, back to the DNC that he had left over from his political campaign. I did not support the DNC. I supported Bernie Sanders, but it doesn't matter. If you run within that party, that corrupt party has control of you. It's like you took a job with an organization. You have a boss that tells you what you can and cannot do. And I deeply regret that my money could be in any way, in any small part, funding a corporate Democrat, someone like Joe Manchin. Now, there's a rotating list of villains, and they're going to just keep picking out a few people for us to hate, saying that they're standing in the way of progress. But Edley pointed out the problem very early on in Obama's campaign. He was spending too much time schmoozing around with the people and doing the feel-good stuff and not the actual hard work of developing policies and listening to these DC insiders who know how to play a game where you lie to get to where you want to be, where you tell people whatever they want to hear so that you can achieve your ultimate goal, which is just attaining a position. It's not what you can do with that power, it's just getting it. That is neoliberalism. So Edley had this idea, and this idea is still valid, and it's something that we need to do with a new third party. So he assembled the tech leaders and he said, imagine saying to millions of donors, because Obama was really the first person to really mobilize the internet and use that tactic to get elected. Social media and all these things, they can be powerful tools. He said, imagine saying to millions of donors, new voters, volunteers, thanks for everything so long. Instead, he urged, imagine a way to transfer/transmute all of that involvement into a new mechanism or set of instrumentalities through which people can feel a heightened and more powerful kind of civic engagement with one another and with Obama and other leaders, and vice versa. So imagine if you had something like Twitter after Obama got elected. Um, I'm not interested if you're a bot. Um, I don't want to be famous. I'm not going to buy any followers. Um, anyways, so it's a great idea. It makes a lot of fucking sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. And if you're watching this after and you don't see the chat, I should set up that thing where the chat goes onto the screen so people don't think I'm crazy. But I got some kind of bot message about buying followers. These things, so the four devils, right? Lust, envy, hate, and jealousy. So lust, I would maybe put greed into that category too. I don't need anybody's money. I don't need followers. I would like to grow this channel in order to just be able to have conversations with people that I like, their ideas, and pick their brains and maybe network together with organizers and activists. Get enough people listening so I can try and do what I want these other powerful people to do, is to use their influence to actually mobilize in the real world and do real things. So, anyways, uh, Edley had a great idea. He said, "Keep them engaged. Keep them engaged after you get elected. Keep them plugged into you. Let them have access to you. The dirty, unwashed masses, these plebeians. Let them be connected to you." And the article goes on to say, as we know, that grand vision for a post-campaign movement never came to fruition. Instead of mobilizing his unprecedented grassroots machine to pressure obstructionist lawmakers, support state and local candidates who shared his vision, and counter the Tea Party. Now, the Tea Party was an experiment that worked. They got John Boehner to resign. They were systematically antagonistic. And the Justice Democrats came in trying to say the same thing, trying to do the same thing. And they failed miserably, and they are still failing miserably. It's like if the Tea Party came into the Republican Party, but once they got elected, they just became and acted like all of the other Republicans. That is not what they did, and that is not what the Justice Democrats was set up to do. So he said, instead of or no, this didn't happen, but instead of, we can turn this around. This is still a valid tactic. This is still something that we need to do. And I want to jump ahead and go to my conclusion, but I'm going to read through first. I'll try and be patient. Instead of mobilizing his unprecedented grassroots machine to pressure obstructionist lawmakers, support state and local candidates who shared his vision, and counter the Tea Party, Obama mothballed his campaign operation. You put mothballs inside of clothing that you're going to sit in a closet forever. Bottling it up inside the Democratic National Committee. They want to set up a boogeyman today. They want the boogeyman now to be people that are hesitant to receive a vaccine. Most people that are hesitant to receive a vaccine are not radical right-wing extremists. They are mostly poor people, marginalized people, people who have no reason to trust the government. And when it was flipped around and Donald Trump was in power, all the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi and all the people that are screaming about how terrible the people who don't get the vaccine are, were saying that they didn't trust the leadership of the country when it was Republican and that they would be afraid of taking the vaccine. It's the vaccine that Donald Trump started creating, and ultimately they succeeded in creating this mRNA vaccine, a technology that has never been used on humans before. Now, there's lots of studies that show that it's efficacy, show its efficacy, and I'm not here to talk about the vaccines today, but the boogeyman that they're putting up is just a distraction. They want the plebeians, and this tactic gets used over and over and recycled over and over and over again. They want to shift our rage to the normal, everyday people around us, to our neighbors and our communities, people of our own same socioeconomic status, people that also suffer because of the greed of the people at the top that steal a majority of the wealth and hoard it only to themselves. So they bottled it up inside the Democratic National Committee, and that is who the boogeyman is. That is one of the largest boogeymen out there. And if we could only keep our eyes fixed on that evil, then we could finally start to get somewhere. So this article goes on to say it was the number one mistake of his presidency. One that set the tone for the next 8 years of dashed hopes and helped pave the way for Donald Trump to harness the pent-up demand for change Obama had unleashed. Obama promised hope and change, and he didn't succeed. People are basic for the most part. People see one side, see things black and white, they process things that way, whether it's just the way that they think or they just don't have time to delve deeper into issues and they just go, the one side promised me something, they didn't deliver, let me try the other side. It's as simple as that. So the question of why, this is back to the article, the question of why the president and his team failed to activate the most powerful political weapon in their arsenal has long been one of the great mysteries of the Obama era. With all of this huge following, with this massive mobilized support, where any issue that Obama wanted to bring up, he could say, go, come out to Washington, D.C., mobilize, and we're going to pass universal health care, the thing that I promised, or at least the public option. And he decided not to do it. And why did he decide not to do it? One man can't do everything. Well, now, this is back to the article. Now, thanks to previously unpublished emails and memos obtained by the New Republic, some from John Podesta's archive, released by WikiLeaks, and others made available by Obama insiders, it's possible for the first time to see the full contours of why Movement 2.0 failed and what could have been. The article mentioned WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks helped us to see so much that was hidden, so many horrible misdeeds that our government committed, and it led to resignations, and it helped to inform us, and it, I'm sure, caused the slowing, at least, of authoritarianism in our society. All things done in darkness will come to light. And we should celebrate Julian Assange as a hero, no matter what we think of him, because of what he did. The man, on principle of not revealing his sources, of protecting the people that trusted him with their information, has sat in prison for more than a decade and been tortured. We need more people like that. And they want to blame him for the rise of Donald Trump. We need to look back at Obama. Obama promised hope and change, and then he said, as Edleys says, imagine saying to millions of donors, new voters, volunteers, thanks for everything so long. And that's what they did. So, WikiLeaks helped us understand why. So we have the insiders. The Rasputin class comes in. We've got Valerie Jarrett, John Podesta, Pete Rose. And then we can add in there a few of the other usual suspects. So Edley attached the initial concept document for Movement 2.0, sort of like a Twitter for Obama's followers. It outlined an audacious vision to create a new home place for Obama supporters that would be ready to go the day after the election, to afford regular people access. Now, I'm not reading from the article anymore. This is my own opinion, or my own hyperbole. To afford access, regular people, the people that fought for his hope and change, the people that would be affected by his hope and change, to still have some sort of say in what happens. And we would have mobilized for these ideas. They said, so long, thanks for everything, go back to sleep. So back to the article. It will be ready to go the day after the election. The new entity would be closely aligned with Obama, but independent of the party and his re-election campaign. Think of it for now as AFO, Americans for Obama, the memo declared, envisioning it as the principal means for continuing the active participation of people in the movement. Even with Bernie Sanders' campaign, he said he was going to be organizer-in-chief. They have massive email lists. They have huge Twitter followings. If they wanted to organize a protest to stop the eviction of more than 6 million people, Bernie Sanders and AOC and Cori Bush and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, they could mobilize the probably tens of millions of followers combined, and they could at least get, let's say, 100,000 people to march on Washington, D.C. and demand that Congress pass an eviction moratorium, at least long enough to allow the funds that were already allocated by the federal government to be handed out, to change the loophole that allows landowners or landlords to refuse the federal funds that would be given to a person who suffered because of the COVID-19 epidemic and couldn't work with their bills piling up. They put a loophole in the fucking funding to allow landlords to evict tenants. And you know how they're going to choose. You know how they're going to pick. Things like systemic racism come into play when it comes to something like this. Moving right along. Back to the article. So this new home, this new place for Obama supporters that would be ready to go the day after the election, the new entity would be closely aligned with Obama, but independent of the party and its re-election campaign. Think of it for now as AFO, Americans for Obama, the memo declared, visioning it as the principal means for continuing the active participation of people in the movement. AFO would not simply whip up support for Obama's legislative agenda, it would gather the input to help shape it. Now, this bothers the DC insiders. Gathering the input from these unwashed masses? How dare you! They don't want to hear from us. They don't think we know what we're talking about. They don't want to hear from the people that are affected by the policies that they're going to propose. They want to do humanitarian things so that they can boast to their friends that they did something good. They want to knock wine glasses with their other millionaire buddies who don't talk to any poor people, who don't go to those parts of town and say, look at me and how good of a person I am. Look at me with my great ideas. Aren't I really something? But Edley's idea was to mobilize the support that got Obama into office and continue the momentum after he got in there to create engagement with the people who pushed him and supported him and raised him up. Think of it like a pyramid. The presidency is 20 miles up in the air, and the people have to create a human pyramid. So they have to bend down and have someone climb on their back, and the next person climbs on their back, and the next person climbs on their back, and they have to watch their shaking arms and hold their muscles tight and keep themselves steady and form it perfectly and climb up on top of each other in service to a candidate who says, after I reach this gigantic door that floats in the sky and climb on this beautiful golden throne and receive all the power and the accolades and the celebrity that comes from that position, that all you people down below me, this pyramid that collapsed, the people that all fell and crumbled to the floor and crawled back like ants, back to their jobs, back to their boring everyday lives with no say in what the king, sitting, floating on that golden throne in the air, untouchable, unless the people get back on their knees and form that fucking pyramid. Now, that on your knees is just for the illusion, the purpose, the imagery that I was trying to use to illustrate this point. We're not supposed to be on our fucking knees. We're supposed to be standing up strong, but we have to use each other to climb back up to that place of power to say, hey, we want to say, and what you're doing, we have to be systematically antagonistic, and we can't let these chastising, condescending voices from people who are very rich and very famous, like the talking heads on MSNBC and CNN, say, be nice to the powerful king in the sky. If you're mad about what he's doing, talk to him in a nice tone. Be civil. This is not a time for civility. But it doesn't have to be that way. If there weren't these gatekeepers, these egotistical little bastards who don't care about you when they do something good that helps you, they only care that their idea is seen as good. They only care that they get the power and the prestige that comes from achieving something humanitarian. And some of them don't give a fuck about humanitarianism at all. They're going to twist their language around, and they're going to come up with ways to justify war and killing people in other countries. It's the easiest way because there's already so much manufactured consent for it within our population. And thank God it's slowly turning the other direction. But there is so much consent for war that they can lie directly to us and manufacture reasons to go into these other poor countries and hurt their citizens in order to wash money through the tax basis, from the tax basis of the United States into these other countries, and then back into the beltway contractors of DC, back into these gigantic corporations, people doing R&D research for the Department of Defense, companies that are already massively wealthy and powerful, places like Alphabet Inc. and Intel. You've got Raytheon and a whole list of usual suspects. But Edley had this idea, and just because he didn't implement it with Obama doesn't mean we can't implement it now, and we should. once we hopefully find another candidate that can mobilize the kind of energy that someone like Bernie Sanders did. But we can do it this time along populist lines. We can do it this time along class lines, because that's the only way we can get enough people into that humid pyramid to lift somebody up into the sky. And then when they get there, we need to already have a mechanism for access to them from regular, everyday working people. So back to the article. AFO would not simply whip up support for Obama's legislative agenda, it would gather the input and help shape it. It would be a place where Obama supporters can come together, affiliate, and organize for change using cutting edge online tools that will create and support a new and deeper form of civic engagement. What a beautiful idea! What a beautiful idea! Why would they not do this? This makes all the fucking sense in the world. We wouldn't have Trump now if this had fucking happened. The people to blame for Donald Trump are this Rasputin class of DC insiders that corrupt every fucking thing they touch because they want to look good in front of their friends at fancy dinners. That is what it fucking comes down to for a lot of these people. They want to be able to slap each other on the back. You know, I heard it was really disturbing because I was a fan of Bernie Sanders, but I heard Bernie Sanders talking to another senator about a speech that he made. And just, I wish I don't have to find the clip because the way he was talking to this guy was like, yeah, I said something good. Oh, I said something good. Like, I don't know. He's like talking about a speech that he made and he's bragging about it to his friend. And you can tell that he just wants to be slapped on the back and told that he did something that was cool. These are serious issues that we're dealing with. Things like healthcare that have to deal with people's lives. There are people who have family members die for lack of medical care, and you're going to tell that family, we're sorry, we can't do anything for you, when they see all of the waste in this country. Why do you think people latched on to Donald Trump? It's because for 8 years they were promised hope and change. And in the very beginning, Obama threw away one of the greatest ideas that was brought up to him during his campaign in favor of the egos of a very small group of people. So back to the article. Critically, the Movement 2.0 team envisioned AFO as a tax-exempt organization that would operate free of the Democratic National Committee. And there's where things go sour. It got pushed aside. The proposal started with the campaign's technology team and true believers, but now it had landed in front of two consummate Washington insiders. This is really a sad story. Hildebrand came to like the idea, creating a movement free from the DNC he believed would put more pressure on Congress to implement Obama's agenda. Pressure is important and pressure is good. In politics, pressure is key. Systematic antagonism is key. These hordes of shit liberals that believe in this fucking civility politics are not going to get us anywhere. They're going to think that they're going to live inside of their self-importance, and they're going to fall right into their graves having accomplished nothing with a big fucking smile on their face, while people suffer all around them because they refuse to speak up, and because they refuse to listen, and because they refuse to allow other people to challenge the leaders who promised them things and then failed to deliver. Where others had seen great possibility, twos saw potential disaster. So Twos is a name I don't know. I would assume that he's some sort of DC insider as well. Paul Twos. veteran political strategist who in 2008 ran Obama's historic Iowa caucus campaign. Another DC insider, another old white man. So we've got twos. I'll be right back. They're not good for you, but I'm going to go have one. All right, so back to the article. We have So where others had seen great possibility, too saw potential disaster. 4 days later, he wrote to Rose and his colleague Hildebrand. As both of you know, I have many concerns about this. As a lover of the party, I really don't like this. So they shelved it. They tossed it on the back burner, they put it mothballs in the coat, and they stuck it in the closet. Stephen Hildebrand, deputy campaign chief and DC consultant, argued to keep M 2.0 out of the DNC because it would put more heat on Congress. Paul Two's political consultant, David Plouffe. Now it seemed the Obamaites and their tech wizards wanted to disrupt the Democratic Party, diverting money and control from the DNC into a untried platform, while inviting input and possibly even organized dissent from Obama's base. They don't want the unclean and unwashed masses to have any say in the policies that directly affect them when they achieve power on their fucking backs. Earlier that summer, activists unhappy with Obama's flip-flop on warrantless surveillance. The guy that promised us hope and change is promoting warrantless surveillance? Back to the article, had used MyBo to build a group of more than 20,000 vocal supporters. We can do this on our own. We don't have to wait to be told that it's okay to do it. We can fucking do it right now. Earning national press and compelling a response from the candidate. So you see that systematic antagonism, organization, and disruption causes the movement of powerful politicians. What if Obama's base didn't like the healthcare reform he came up with? He fucking passed Mitt Romney's Republican conservative healthcare plan. They completely fucked up the rollout and they made it completely unaffordable for poor people. I know this because I was much poorer then, and I could not afford it. What if Obama's base didn't like the healthcare reform he came up with? Well, he didn't, and rallied independently around a single-payer plan. Well, that happened with Bernie Sanders. Besides, grassroots movements, no matter how successful, don't reliably yield what political consultants want most: money and victory for their candidates, with plenty of spoils for themselves. For insiders like Two's, Movement 2.0 is a step too far. These are the top contributors this year, or last year, to the Democratic National Committee. Mike Bloomberg, a racist man, a billionaire who tried to buy his way into the presidency, who was exposed for his racism with the stop and frisk program. Now, there was a guy named Benjamin Dixon who brought a lot of this to our attention, and he gained a lot of fame for himself for doing it. And then his language became tempered and neutered when he finally saw that he could take some of these spoils and riches for himself. Organizations like TYT and people like Benjamin Dixon, they may start out with a good intention. I think Benjamin Dixon did. But then once they see that they can achieve some status for themselves, they stop challenging the establishment, and they become a neutered and useless voice that only puts people to sleep. But Mike Bloomberg, a disgusting, arrogant man like Bill Gates, like Jeff Bezos, these people who think they're above humanity and they have massive amounts of wealth that could solve many of our societal woes, and they do things like fly into space on a giant penis-shaped rocket like Jeff Bezos. Didn't even make it out of the upper atmosphere, shot himself up into the air, and came back down. Alphabet Inc. That's a huge corporation that owns Google. Microsoft Corporation. Brain Capital, University of California. Valor Equity Partners. Renaissance Technologies. Blackstone Group. Blackstone Group, a group that has a concerted effort to try and buy up all of the properties in this country, or many of the properties in this country, so that they can force people to become permanent renters. Bill Gates is buying up all of the farmland in this country so that there is a corporate-owned production of all of our food to push out competition at every step of the way, to prevent people, entrepreneurs, from achieving anything outside of these gigantic corporate influences that own all of the means of production. And they give money to the DNC, and the DNC plays along with whatever they want. Amazon.com, a company that operated at a loss in order to starve out all of the small bookstores in the country, essentially bankrupting all of the entrepreneurial small bookstores. Now, there are still some small bookstores in the country, but Amazon did a very vicious attack on them and offered a product at a price that they could not compete with, at a loss, without any intervention from the government, so that they could starve out the competition and they could corner the market as a gigantic monopoly. Bessemer Venture Partners, Grosvenor Capital Management, Stanford Group, Ballpost Group, Centerbridge Partners, Global Energy Partners, General Catalyst Partners, Harvard University, Walt Disney Corporation. Walt Disney does the same thing, starves out, buys out their competition. The DNC stands for brutal and vicious capitalism, monopolies, consolidation of power and wealth at the top. And Obama saw a crossroads, and he chose to go with the DNC. the boogeyman that lies to you. Just like the GOP. The DNC, the GOP, they are exactly the same. They serve the same people. They have the same donors. Edley knew that Tu's blowback spelled trouble. On August 24th, the day before Obama's triumphal convention began in Denver, he emailed Podesta to express hope that it was just a misunderstanding. He asked Podesta to keep the issue off the agenda of the transition board's next meeting until they figured out what to do. Podesta agreed. I think we should not raise it at all tomorrow, he told Edley, and come up with a separate plan on how to proceed. Yes, I don't think that you should raise this at all. No, we don't want these peasants, these plebeians. We don't want them to have any influence or access. And they put it in the fucking closet and stuffed mothballs in it. These people have and I highlighted this in the article because it said very well, they have a paranoid possession of the conventional trappings of political power. These are the boogeymen. These are the gatekeepers who stand in the way of real change. It's not Jill Stein. It's not the Green Party. It's not the People's Party. It's not Jimmy Dore. It's not the Fred Hampton leftists. It's not all the activists or the pundits or the voices that say the two-party duopoly has their knee on our necks and we shouldn't support them. Those people are not the reason that a massive amount of citizens of this country supported Donald Trump. They supported Donald Trump because after all the mobilization for Obama, for hope and change, Obama went to govern, like he said, as a Reaganite, as a conservative Republican. They wanted all of Obama's politics to be filtered through the DNC. The original backers of Movement 2.0 have been sidelined. I had nothing to do with the new memo, Edley says. I guess they liked our name for it, but chose to pervert the idea to something quite conventional and, forgive me, trivial. To me, real movement building had to be about defining and advancing progressivism, not a communication strategy from the West Wing basement costumed as a faux movement. The kind of movement we wanted would have helped Obama a great deal without making it all about him. After all, even Obama's campaign wasn't all about him or his policy platform. So you have them running as fake progressives. You have people, even Bernie Sanders, with the whole not me, us movement. But they have the email lists. They have the massive amount of followers. They can mobilize the people to achieve their policy agenda. But they choose not to do it. And these usual suspects, these Rasputin advisors, worm their way in and corrupt everything for their paranoid possession of the conventional trappings of political power. Edley and his cohorts weren't finished yet. The idea of keeping Obama's online loyalists involved and active had not entirely died. The new memo called for quickly moving to enable the campaign to keep engaging its grassroots supporters after the election. Steps should be taken now to ensure the possibility does not evaporate, leaving no vehicle for the community in the short term. Listen, there's no midterm election going on right now. There's no organizing for it. There's no presidential election going on right now. There's no organizing for it. That doesn't mean that we should not all be engaged and we should not all be mobilizing. We know these things are coming. What we need to do is organize primary challenges to every single politician that we can see. We need to get all of these DC insiders out. We need to only run people who promise not to take any corporate donations. We need to only run people who promise not to take on any of these DC insiders. That's something that is left out of the conversation. They talk about not taking corporate money, but they don't talk about these little snakes, these worms getting in. We know who they are. We know their names. We need to exile them from power. On October 10th, Edley told Kapoor and Alexander by email that Pete Roos had agreed to try to arbitrate all of this. But 5 days later, Edley reported that he was getting nowhere. He says, "I am frustrated beyond words on this. We'll work it hard today. I think since the campaign team has rigged something for the transition period, they just keep backburnering the longer run issue. They're very good at backburnering issues. They're very good at kicking the can down the road. They're very good at showing up at fancy balls and galas. They're very good at schmoozing with corporate donors. They're very good at making speeches in front of adoring crowds. But they're not good at recognizing the people that get them to those positions of power when they get there, and respecting their opinion and sourcing their ideas and giving them a seat at the table. They don't want to share that power because they have a paranoid possession of the conventional trappings of political power. It cannot be said any better than that." On November 5th, the day after Obama's victory, his headquarters in Chicago were deluged with phone calls and emails from supporters asking for guidance on how to keep going. Exactly as Edley had feared, no answers were forthcoming, not even about whether the tens of thousands of volunteers who had built personal fundraising groups on MyBo would be able to continue them. "We're all fired up now and twiddling our thumbs," wrote one frustrated volunteer from Pennsylvania. All the leader volunteers are getting bombarded by calls from volunteers essentially asking, "Now what? Now what? Now what?" They build up this huge amount of energy and then they give us nothing to fight for because they want us to just go back to sleep so that they can do nothing until they have to run for office again to maintain the possession of the trappings of political power. Force the vote was an attempt to grab some of that momentum that had already started to die down from the Bernie Sanders campaign after we all felt defeated when he dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. The senator from Delaware, Credit Card Joe, the old man who can barely put a sentence together, not because of his stutter, but because he is senile. This terrible excuse for a leader who they force down our throats because he will do what the DNC corporation tells him to do. This man who was raised and mentored by segregationist senators. This man who lied through his teeth during his first political campaign, distorting his record at school, his mediocre record at school, among other things, and was exposed and shamed for that. The man who Barack Obama ran with to comfort the hidden racism of white voters. Joe Biden was Barack Obama's token closet suburbanite racist. He said he didn't want his children growing up in a racial jungle. He opposed segregation and the mixing of races in schools. There's no way around that. And then you see it happen again. Biden picks Kamala Harris, his token black woman, his token woman of color. So the article goes on, and Obama told Pluff, this little Rasputin character whispering poison into his ear, "But just make sure you find time to help figure out how to keep our supporters involved. I don't know how we can succeed without them. That sounded more like Bernie, maybe. We need to make sure they're pushing from the grassroots on Washington and helping to spread what we're trying to do in their local communities. And at the very least, we have to give them the opportunity to stay involved and in touch. They gave their heart and soul to us. This shouldn't feel like a transactional relationship because that's not what it was. I want them along for the ride for the next 8 years, helping us deliver on all we talked about in our campaign. But they didn't do it. The DC insiders won. They deployed the campaign's vast email list to hawk coffee mugs and generate thank you notes to Democratic members of Congress who backed Obama's initiatives. They want to knock wine glasses with people of their class, other patricians, and let all the dirty, unwashed masses leave them alone and stay far away from them until they have to run again so that they can climb on their backs and form that humid pyramid to reach that golden throne in the sky. Republicans, on the other hand, wasted no time in building a grassroots machine of their own, one that proved capable of blocking Obama at almost every turn. Obama could have had his own machine of grassroots support, but the DC insiders, obsessed with the trappings of power, blocked Edleys' attempt at making it happen for their own personal gain. If any progressive runs and hires one of these scumbags, don't fucking trust them. If you see these heads bobbing around on the news on CNN or NBC, don't trust them. They are bad faith actors. The Republicans wasted no time in building a grassroots machine of their own, one that proved capable of blocking Obama at almost every turn. Within weeks of his inauguration, conservative activists began calling for local Tea Parties to oppose the president's plan to help foreclosed homeowners. And we know how all of that panned out. He bailed out the big banks. No one went to jail. I think one person, a very low-level member of this huge Ponzi scheme where they were hawking overvalued mortgages and puffing up a bubble in the housing market. People lost their homes, they lost their livelihood, they lost their chance at any type of generational wealth. And Obama prosecuted no one because he was willing to do the bidding of the DNC, and he chose them over his grassroots organizers. And that is why we got Donald Trump. So the article goes on. Edley, for his part, still can't get over the opportunity that was lost. He admits that he probably alienated Obama's top campaign brass with his earlier intervention. Now, I don't know much about Edley, but I know he advised some pretty terrible presidents. He is probably a neoliberal, and he probably has some very neutered and watered down views about change. Maybe he doesn't. This idea was great. And the fact that he was in there fighting for this type of thing is very, very important. But he says that he alienated Obama's top campaign brass with his earlier intervention. But he still doesn't think that's why his idea for Movement 2.0 died. Mostly he believes it was an issue of control. Our proposal would have required that members of the political team who had just won the nomination be willing to cede control of the grassroots movement and turn it more in the direction of policy advocacy and progressive advocacy. The Barnacle 420 says, I don't know why people like Obama so much. It's because there's a whole mythology built around him. Nobody talks about this kind of stuff. Nobody points out these sort of things. And I don't know. It's these guys are the culprits. People like Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, and this is Obama's legacy. Instead of, he saw a crossroads. He could have set up something outside of the DNC. He had a massive amount of supporters. They were following him. He could have told them to do whatever he wanted them to do. The same thing with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders could have told all of his supporters to do what he wanted to do. He could have dropped down and run as a third party, but they had the boogeyman of Trump, and everyone was so afraid of having him get reelected that they did whatever they could to force Joe Biden on us. And this is Obama's legacy. Right from the very beginning, he started to sell out to DC insiders, if he ever was on our side to begin with. I mean, this is very interesting. So here's what it costs to go to Harvard Law School. Let me see if I still have it up. So this is 9 months of Harvard Law. This is back a few years ago. It's probably a lot more now, but in 2018 to 2019, it was $63,000 to go. Room and board's another $24,000. Mandatory HUHS, waivable Harvard University student health plan, books, supplies, allowance, travel allowance. So almost $100,000 for 9 months at Harvard. That's more than most, probably, I don't know the statistics. Maybe the bottom 70% of people in this country make. What's the average median income? $31,133. So that's 3 years of work from a regular person. And yes, Obama was a politician's politician. That's the Barnacle 420 says. He was a good old boy. He was very comfortable in this elite society because no matter what he talks about his upbringing, and he was educated in a school that costs 3 times, or what 3 years of a normal person working costs, just to go there for 9 months. And he had some really terrible advisors. Rahm Emanuel closed half of his city's mental health clinics, moved almost 2,800 patients. A lot of the poor people, I've said this on a few other streams, a lot of the homeless people that you see on the street, they're victims of cost-cutting measures in cities to save small amounts of money. I mean, when you compare any of this stuff to the military budget and the waste in the military budget, we have our priorities completely out of line. But they put people on the street. These clinics are never run properly. They're always, it says in this article, the clinics are in such poor shape, they lost all state funding. I mean, or they privatize it. So they make it a profit incentive like they do with prisons. And then you have consultants for the prison industry and police unions and prison guard unions fighting against things like the legalization of marijuana because they need more bodies in their prisons to make more money. Capitalism produces such evil, and it's all this love of money. It's all of this greed. And Obama, right away at the very beginning, he had an opportunity to split from the DNC, mobilize his grassroots campaign, mobilize his supporters, and he just told them, thanks, see you later. Your voice is not important here. I'm going to listen to people like David Axelrod. If you guys missed the stream, if you're just coming in, feel free to watch it, replay it. I'm going to leave it up. And I'm going to try to put together these people's faces in like a little tweet or something like that. And if you want to share it around, feel free. Like, follow, subscribe. Not subscribe. I don't think you can subscribe. I don't. It's not important to me that you subscribe. I don't want to take anybody's money. But if you follow me, that's helpful because we can try to get this message out to more people. And it's important not just to, shit on Obama, but to point out how there are tactics and there are things that we should be doing, we can do to mobilize people, and also just prove that we can't trust the DNC. And when people argue with you and tell you that, Jill Stein or your vote or your opinion or third parties were responsible for Trump, you only have to point back to Obama to prove that that is where Donald Trump came from. And look at his war record. I mean, he dropped 20,000 bombs. This article from The Independent says, but of the confirmed bombings, the vast majority, 24,287, took place in Iraq and Syria, according to analysis of official data by Michael Zenko. His research concluded that the U.S. dropped 79% of all 30,000 coalition bombs in 2016. He ran as anti-war. He ran as war as just a last resort, and he almost dropped all of the bombs that we had in our arsenal. He authorized 10 times more drone strikes than George Bush, and he's been at war for longer than any president in U.S. history. And these drone strikes, let's see, counting drone strike deaths, Human Rights Institute. Let's try to find a chart. So let's see. Pakistan 2011. Bureau of Investigative Journalism killed more than 400 people, journalists. Is that? No, this is something else. What are they counting? Militant strong identified. Okay. Counts of civilians reported killed, Pakistan 2011. Over 40 civilians. 72 to 155 civilians killed. So that's just Pakistan. Let's see if we can find another chart. I don't know, I've been going for a long time. I do have this up for the cost of war. And okay, so I have it here. So since 9/11, 7,820. This is all in, let's see, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So most of this occurred during Obama's term. Civilian DoD casualties about 21, so the DoD protects itself. Non-military and police, 109,000. Allied troops, 1,400. And then here's the one that really makes my skin crawl. 244 to 226,000 civilians murdered by U.S. drone strikes since 9/11. More than a quarter million people, innocent people, more than the opposition fighters, more than double the opposition fighters. So more than 50% of the people that were killed in our foreign wars and interventions were civilians. There's something wrong with that picture. Journalists, media workers, 362 journalists, 566 humanitarians. But these two statistics, Obama ran and debated George Bush and said that war is a last resort. We need to negotiate. But then he hid under the cover of drone strikes, which are very impersonal and don't get a lot of press, to drop bombs, bomb after bomb after bomb on poor countries and kill more than 50% innocent civilians. And Edley pops his head up again, and I guess I shouldn't say anything negative about Edley because he seems like the only good actor in this whole situation. He talked about Rahm Emanuel, who just got a position in Joe Biden's cabinet because these people get recycled over and over and over again. He's an ambassador to Japan now. He said it's almost as if Rahm Emanuel cares more about the re-election prospects of his friends on Capitol Hill than he does about scoring policy victories that reflect Obama's values. So they promised hope and change, and they came in as feckless leadership, and Trump was willing to call it out. He was willing to say, you guys are all corrupt, and you're all here for yourselves, and I'm a populist, and I'm going to come in and help the average man. But he didn't. He hired the same swamp, and he let them run his campaign while he went out and golfed. So if you want a boogeyman, don't point your finger at the guy that is scared of the government and has good fucking right to be and doesn't want to get vaccinated. Because when Trump was in office, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden were both saying that they wouldn't take the vaccine or they would be afraid of taking the vaccine. Now they flipped it around because everything is partisan. So try and remain objective, be good to your friends and your neighbors, volunteer for your local legal aid society to help process the funding, and think of ways that we can organize, think of ways that we can connect. This movement 2.0 that Edley proposed, we don't need a candidate to propose it. We just need a set of ideals and some goals, and we need people to mobilize. We don't have those email lists, but we're going to have to put them together. We don't have those phone numbers, but we can put them together. We can organize a people's coalition separate from the DNC, separate from the GOP, these corporate organizations funded by Bloomberg and Alphabet and Microsoft Corporation and Brain Capital and Amazon and BlackRock. It's all right there, out there in the open. It's mask off oligarchy, authoritarianism. And they are very, very comfortable thinking that all of their propaganda has put everyone to sleep, that they're breaking people's spirits who believed in Bernie's campaign, who believed in AOC and Cori Bush, that they've broken us down to the point where we're not willing to fight. But we need to shift our tactics. We need to organize and mobilize against the powerful and the elite. And we need to get over our petty differences with one another and come around some very basic principles. And we can stand up and force change. Our public opinion got us out of Afghanistan. Remember that. It is possible to pressure our leaders, but we have to toss out the door the civility politics bullshit. We have to ignore all the identity politics that tries to neuter us and render us ineffective. It doesn't mean you go out there and you feel free to be racist or xenophobic, but it means that you ignore these very casually thrown about attacks of racism or sexism for people that criticize someone like AOC for going to that gala just because she feels like she wants to go, just because she's more interested in being a celebrity than she is in being a revolutionary, because she's voting for more money for police, because she's voting for more money for war, because she's not voting against upward transfers of wealth. She no longer gets to wear the trappings of a socialist if that is her voting record. And before I go, let me go ahead and play an out of context clip.
Hi, my diamonds. It's Crystal with an X. Here's my simple routine for getting hot and perfect. Drink at least a gallon of water before.
Off, I fixed it, went down. No.
Well, where are you?
I was.
That's weird. These streams start to get really laggy.
I never do
Because
something
it
like
wouldn't
that.
be expected twice.
Yeah.
Rachel Ray are more likely to vote.
And I didn't want to metagame mid-round, so that's why I'm saving it for here.
I can't find it. It doesn't matter. There's no need to take any cheap shots. This is actually pretty serious stuff. Good night, everybody. Thank you for listening. Vote them all out. Vote them all the fuck out. Let's make this trend every day until the midterms and keep it going to the general and let them know that we are not going to let them be comfortable while they oppress us and take our freedoms away. And put leaders up in front of us that refuse to listen to us once they gain power. We've all experienced probably something like that in our own personal lives. Screw me once, shame on me, shame on you. Screw me once, shame on you. Screw me twice, shame on me. So shame on us for believing them another time, unless they make some serious fucking concessions. And one of them should be not to let any of these Rasputin class cocksuckers, I keep using that word, these Rasputin class assholes into their campaigns to tell them that we have to do things the way we've always done it because that's how it's done. That would take a real populist movement that remains connected to a grassroots movement of massive people on the ground. We have more power than they do if we can mobilize and support each other around some very basic ideas. Good night, everybody.